high rep sets as high as 50 reps and low rep sets as few as 1 rep per set produce hypertrophy. So on a theoretical basis, the idea that high reps don't cause gains in size, we can throw away instantly and replace with may cause less growth in size than some other part of the rep range. We can't say they don't grow any size because it's just categorically false, because we literally have studies where we made people do sets of 50 and they still got more jacked. It's tough to argue against results. Hey folks, Dr. Mike here for RP Strength, and today's video topic is to ask and answer the question, is it really true that high reps don't build size nearly as well, or maybe at all, compared to low reps, but going heavy is categorically superior for putting on size than going light? Is that really true? We're going to find out real soon. We're going to approach this issue from a few different angles, just to make sure we have a good completeness of thought around it. First, we're going to talk about the physiological rationale, knowing what we know about muscle physiology. What does it tell us about high reps versus low reps and their proclivity to cause muscle growth? After that, we'll take a scan over the summarized version of the scientific literature to date to tell us what it tells us directly about high reps versus low reps, which is curious and funny. I'll get to that in a bit. And then we'll talk about the real world of like, well, what do real jacked people actually do? It's a good idea to inform ourselves of that as well. We'll talk about the downsides of both high and low reps because they have clear upsides. P.S. They grow muscle. But the downsides are distinct, and based on the nature of the downsides, using one versus another now becomes a solvable problem. Which one should you use and what combination should you use, low reps or high reps, can be nuanced based on your individual responses, needs, and certain conditions. So then we'll talk about that lastly in choosing your approach about what you should actually do. And at the very end, as I do with some of these videos, especially ones that which the topic is pertinent, we'll kind of do a real quick overview for folks who are beginners to training. People have trained, up to about 3 years pretty seriously, what they should get out of this. Intermediates, folks have been training between 3 and 7 years on average, pretty hard. And then advanced folks who've been training more than 7 years and really kind of know a lot. What should they be focused on here? So, physiological rationale is first. When you lift heavier loads, it requires more tension production by the muscle in order to accomplish this lifting. Not controversial. Tension also seems to cause muscle growth. There are a couple of candidate mechanisms, a couple of tension detectors so far discovered in muscle tissue. More of them are discovered all the time. And the body seems to be able to sense the tension that the muscle is producing or is being produced through the muscle. And that tension kind of tells the other systems of the muscle that are responsible for muscle growth, like, hey, shit's happening. I want to get some growth going. And the more tension you expose the muscle to, the more that growth machinery is activated. So heavy training is great. Heavy training absolutely grows muscle. The downside with higher rep training, which is lighter, think of sets of 5 as heavy and sets of 30 as light, is that if you do 1 rep with your 5 rep max, that's a crap load of tension. And the muscles are screaming that whole rep, hey, muscle growth machinery, activate, Power Rangers, assemble. Scott, the video guy, did you ever watch Power Rangers when you were a little kid?
I was a little old for it, but yeah.
I was a little old for it too. But that doesn't mean the Pink Ranger can't get it, you feel me? Does that joke age well or no? Usually you Google these people and they're involved on like Epstein's Island or some shit like that. And you're like, man, nobody can have any good things anymore. In any case, Power Rangers assemble. Each rep of a set of 5 stimulates lots of muscle growth because the tension's so high. But when you train with higher reps and thus lower weight, each repetition is comparatively a whisper of muscle growth. It's like, hey, grow muscle. Muscle's like, what? The tension sensors are like, yeah. If you heard that, good. If not, no big deal. Why no big deal? Because we'll say it again. 30 repetitions means that you whisper something 30 times over. If your friends try to get you to understand something, they can yell it a few times, you'll get it, or they can whisper it or say it quietly like 30 times. And if you don't get it, there's something wrong with you, right? So yes, it's true that per repetition in a high rep set, you get less growth stimulated per rep. But, and this is a huge but, I'm talking about J-Lo in her prime type of huge, no, wait, wrong but. You can do more reps. In fact, you have to do more reps. You do more reps. We're talking about high reps versus low reps. So yes, every set that you do of 5, each rep in there is stimulating a lot of muscle growth, but there are only 5 of them. On the other hand, sets of 30, for example, every single rep doesn't produce a huge growth stimulus, but there's 30 of them. And gee whiz, every single rep of a 30 rep set would have to be like 1/6 as muscle growth producing and inducing as every rep in the set of 5 for it to equate on hypertrophy at the end of a working set. It's a big deal. So this is a bigger deal depending on how you stretch things out as well. Yeah, 5 to 30 is the accepted range, but we know that sets of 1, 2, and 3, and 4 also grow muscle. So if you're trying to build muscle with singles, if you're saying, look, it's all about tension. All right, fine. Sets of 1, cool. But how do sets of 1 compare to sets of 10? Sets of 1 close to your 1 rep max is as much tension as you're able to produce, but just once. Huge message delivered once. Sets of 10 are still pretty heavy, but you can produce 10 stimuli, and not any one of those 10 is going to be as growth promoting as a 1 all-out max rep. But damn, it's not like they're half off or something, or even a fifth or a sixth of the power. It's probably more like 70 or 80% per rep. So the amount of growth you get from a set of 1 all the way maximum to a set of 10 maximum is massively tilted in favor of 10. And that relationship, as you go to 15, 20, 25, 30, doesn't completely disappear. It still holds to some extent. And as you do sets of 5 or 10 for your high load condition, and sets of 25 to sets of 30 for your high reps condition, there's a little bit more equalizing there. But on a purely predictive value or purely predictive heuristic, off of just understanding, okay, heavy stimulates a lot, but high rep stimulates a little, but if you add up the high reps, it's more stimulus, it's not abundantly clear at face value that higher reps should produce less growth, because the volume, the number of reps you do is so much higher with higher reps. There would have to be a huge discount. And eventually there is. But that discount doesn't apply for sets of 15 or 20 or 25, nearly to the extent to make those rep ranges produce less growth over time. There's another thing here. Just on theory, the pump and the burn seem to be better with higher reps. The perception of mind-altering tension is not even close to the same. You can't feel a crap load of tension with sets of 20. Where the hell are you supposed to feel that from? It's lightweight. Sets of 5, oh yeah, every rep rips your shit up. But on pumps and on the burn you get closer to the end of reps, yeah, higher reps do very, very well. And pump and burn may be indicators and not causative of growth, but they are correlated to growth. And if you're getting a lot of pumps and burns from higher reps, then it stands to reason that maybe even though they add a small fraction of growth to the tension component, there's a lot of tension coming in from high reps to begin with, and some extra metabolite stuff, and some extra pump stuff, all of which has been linked in at least animal studies and some human studies to the mechanisms of hypertrophy. You're starting to think like, man, doubting high rep training sets of, well, let's say 15 to 30 reps as an effective growth modality starts to seem kind of odd, because we already know from a volume perspective it crushes. We already know that reps add up their hypertrophic potential. It's not just all about going heavy once. It's nonsense. A set of 10 is much more hypertrophic than a set of 1. Even both are taken to maximum. And that logic doesn't automatically break down at 12 or 15 or even 20. Just gets a little bit more muted. And putting all that together, if you knew what you knew only from just this physiology chat part of this video, you'd be like, why the hell are people saying that high reps don't grow muscle nearly as effectively or at all compared to low reps? Why would people say that? Maybe they're looking at the scientific literature directly. So let's examine that. The good news about the scientific literature on low reps versus high reps is that there have been a lot of studies done over the years, decades, really. And so we have a large enough base of literature with enough diversity in it and enough replication, and attacking the problems from various slightly different perspectives, different angles, that we now have a pretty good sense of what's going on. And here's what's going on kind of in 3 different parts. Multiple studies confirm the following 3 things. First, all rep ranges between sets of 1 and sets of 50, that's right, 50 reps in one set, dependably grow muscle in most of the groups, maybe all of the groups that have been studied. For sure untrained folks, and even folks that are pretty well trained, what we would call intermediates. That also works straight up. As long as each set is brought close to failure, and I don't mean all the way, I mean 3 reps away from failure, high rep sets as high as 50 reps and low rep sets as few as 1 rep per set produce hypertrophy. So on a theoretical basis, the idea that high reps don't cause gains in size, we can throw away instantly and replace with may cause less growth in size than some other part of the rep range. But we can't say they don't grow any size because it's just categorically false, because we literally have studies where we made people do sets of 50 and they still got more jacked. It's tough to argue against results. Second point is that the highest growth per set seems to occur between sets of 5 and 30 reps. What the literature has found is if you do sets of 1, 2, 3 reps per set, or if you do sets of like 40, 45, 50 reps per set, even if you equate the number of sets you're doing, you get a little bit less impressive hypertrophy in very low reps and in very high reps. Sets of 5, close to failure, all the way to sets of 30 reps close to failure, is a very, very difficult time in the scientific literature to even discern the two. What do I mean by that? That means if I gave you a study or a few studies where they were comparing low rep groups to high rep groups, low rep sort of 5-ish, high rep sort of 30-ish, but I had ChatGPT go through and eliminate all labels from the document as to which one was 5 or which one was 30, and all you got to look at was the results, the differences in growth and the graphs, it would be very difficult for you to pick out which one was 5 and which one was 30. So can we confidently say that sets of 5 to 10 are more growth promoting on average than sets of 25 to 30? No, we actually cannot, because literature tells us that work set for work set, they kind of produce a very similar amount of growth. So similar that we can't tell them apart in most studies, which is a really, really big deal. But it's also a big deal to note that, yeah, sets of 1, 2, 3, 4, not ideal. Sets of over 30, probably also not ideal. On the one hand, the problem with sets of 1, 2, 3, 4 is just insufficient volume. There's just not enough total repetitions over your workout to really scream enough muscle growth stimulus. The problem with sets of 40, 50, et cetera reps is that, well, there's plenty of communication, but the bandwidth is super, super tiny. And so each time your muscles like grow a little, and your muscle on the other end are like, what? We're supposed to be growing? What the hell's going on? The tension is so low that it's no longer nearly as robust of a per rep muscle growth stimulus, much less robust, like exponentially less robust. So such that if you do, if you're a pretty experienced lifter and you somehow do a working set, truly one set, no myo reps, no pauses, of 100 reps, you're probably going to see very little growth because the tension is so small that it's just not registering. And tension probably works on an S curve like many of these biological processes do, where if you have very low tension, say sets of 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, you're down here registering very little muscle growth, which is why when people run, especially for months at a time, they get into running, they don't gain that amount of muscle usually. About the same, especially if they're pretty well trained before, they might even lose muscle. If they're completely untrained, they'll gain some, but nothing crazy to write home about. So it's shaped like an S. So once you pass around that 40 to 50 rep range, it starts going up. When you get up to about 30 reps, it kind of starts to top out a little bit. And then at 5 reps, it curves back over so that doing any heavier training than 5 reps actually doesn't do you much good. And then if you kept going, sets of 4, 3, 2, 1, there's actually a little dip at the end of the S where they don't produce as much hypertrophy. So you get worse hypertrophy on that end and worse hypertrophy on that end. But 5 to 30 is a really, really awesome range. Literature confirmed, scientific study confirmed. Lastly, if we broaden our perspective of science to taking a look at studies in which they ask people, hey, how do you train for hypertrophy? They've asked powerlifters this, weightlifters this, bodybuilders this. There's more than a handful of observational studies or really survey-based studies. And it turns out that people who got much bigger in the real world when surveyed, they almost always did it with a combination. There's no reason to get into camps heavy versus light, low rep versus high rep. Most people got jacked. Some used mostly sets of 5 to 10. Some used mostly sets of 15 to 30, but almost everyone used a mixture of the two, a combination. And there might be something important to that combination. We'll get to that in a sec. So basically to wrap up the science part, all rep ranges between 1 and 50 grow muscle. The best growth you see is in the 5 to 30 rep range, and it's really hard to tell apart what's 5, what's 30, and what's everything in between. Very, very similar growth, at least in studies. And then in the observational literature, people generally got big with a wide variety of rep ranges. Why is that important? Because if you had studies on beginners training for 3 months at a time that said, hey, look, sets of 20, 25, and 30 work great, super well compared to sets of 5, 10, 15. But you looked at the real world, did a bunch of surveys with competitive bodybuilders, powerlifters, weightlifters, and they were basically like, yeah, we never do anything over 10 reps. And I tried it before, especially at a phase where I'm doing lots of 50 sets of 15, 20. I just didn't get any bigger. I got smaller, I got weaker, I got tired. If that was the case, you'd be like, okay, maybe for beginners it works, because like a lot of shit works for beginners. Maybe when there's an experimenter there yelling at you, you can really push to failure hard enough to get those last few reps of a 30 rep set. But in the real world, maybe it doesn't work. But in the real world, it is used, which brings us to the real world. So we have a scientific approach to the real world, and then we have just an observational approach to the real world. Couple of points in the real world discussion here. First is that loads of amazing bodybuilders over the years have loved high repetitions. Tom Platz was known for ultra high reps. Jay Cutler did a bunch of high reps. Arnold fucking Schwarzenegger did tons of high reps. For the love of God. Why am I saying this with such passion? Because there are folks in the collective sphere of knowledge and understanding of hypertrophy, the social media, etc. And some of these folks kind of basically say, like, if you're not training heavy, you're not training hardcore like the real big guys who got real big. But the big guys who got real big also used high reps and swear by them. And Phil Heath is another one. He used plenty of high reps. You go argue against Phil Heath's arms. I don't know what you want from me. But real bodybuilders do high reps all the time. On the other hand, tons of real bodybuilders over the years have used low reps very, very effectively. Ronnie Coleman, Dorian Yates, classic. Johnny Jackson lifted immense amounts of weight for low repetitions and got yoked to shit. So in the real world, people are getting big doing the whole 5 to 30 range. So when folks come in and say, oh, look, anything north of 20 reps doesn't work for size, you got to be like, based on what? And they're not based on physiological inference. It's not based on scientific literature, which directly contradicts that claim. And it's actually just not even based on what real bodybuilders do to get results in the real world. We got a real big problem here. Why the hell are we saying this kind of stuff? It seems just pulled out of a hat. For you personally, very likely when you've trained through a broad variety of rep ranges, you've probably had high rep workouts that give you a few things. One, killer pumps. You can't even bend your legs. Insane perturbation. Basically, something's fucked up in a good way. You have trouble walking down the stairs after a leg workout. You're not like, oh man, high reps don't work at all. Am I right, brothers? They're like, you're going to walk downstairs? Like, I was kind of going to wait 30 minutes because I don't want to fall. Like, oh, so your legs are unfazed? Like, well, no, they're really fucked up. Like, but fucked up in a special way that doesn't make them grow? Like, yeah, man, I don't know. Sets of 5, bro. All right. Walk down the stairs. Like, oh man, fuck you guys. That doesn't make any goddamn sense. So you got the killer pumps, nollie perturbation, and later, just to make sure you didn't miss the beat, insane DOMs. You do a couple of sets of 20. Try this at home. Don't get rhabdo trying this shit. But a couple sets of 20 full range of motion leg press will fuck you up beyond anything that you have witnessed in your life. You will get a week-long delayed onset muscle soreness. If you can tell me with a straight face you don't think that correlates to muscle growth, hey, fuck, dope, amazing. But that's probably not the case, because pumps, perturbation, how messed up you get, and delayed onset soreness magnitude tend to be the best correlates of growth approaches. If you think about it for a second, it's like, okay, what grows people predictably more from the scientific literature? Going closer to failure. Okay, that causes better pumps, more perturbation, and more DOMs. Doing higher volumes, yep, causes all three. Making sure that you're well fed, it causes all three. Huge pumps when you're well fed. When you're dieted down for a show, you can't get any pumps and you don't grow much. When you are controlling the eccentric, when you're doing training at long muscle lengths and a deep stretch. I don't even know of any kind of growth enhancing training modalities that don't result in bigger pumps, gnarlier perturbation, and more intense soreness and fatigue after. And high reps give you all of these predictably, not for every muscle, not all the time, not for all individuals, but most people have felt it. So in the real world, to write off high reps is just nothing to do with growth whatsoever, or just not as growth promoting, and it curiously ignores a lot of proxies for muscle growth. And a lot of people will respond and say, pump and burn and perturbation and stuff have nothing to do with growth. But I think because they correlate almost one-to-one to all of the best research confirmed training practices, I think it's highly likely that they correlate well to growth, and that you just wouldn't write off high reps, because high reps seem to have a lot of shit going on that makes us think, hey, some muscle growth is occurring here. Now, mind you, that's just part of the evidence. The direct evidence is that in the scientific literature, people actually grow tons of muscle for high reps. So kind of a closed case. Now, there are distinct downsides with both low reps and high reps, which opens up our conversation to how to use them best, now that we know both work. Heavy weights, think sets of 5 to 10, for example. They carry a higher acute injury risk. Your probability of tearing your pec off the bone in a set of 8 incline presses is categorically different than in a set of 15 than in a set of 25. Getting hurt with your 27 rep max on an incline barbell press is like, you just had it coming. I don't know what the fuck happened. Getting hurt with a set of 15 with your 17 rep max, yeah, shit happens, but it's pretty heavy. Unlikely you'll get hurt, but more likely than what's a set of, 25. But if you do a set of 5 with your 7 rep max, I actually don't want to even see you do incline sets of 5. I'm kind of like, oh, look, is the probability of injury insanely small? Absolutely, it is. But relatively, compared to much higher reps, it's not even in the same category. So if you're really injury averse, maybe you're super dry, dieting for a show, something like that, we'll get to the use cases in a bit. Maybe the acute high injury risk of low reps just doesn't make any goddamn sense, especially if you know that you're going to get the same amount of growth from low reps as you are from higher reps, but with a notably, categorically lower risk of injury acutely from those high rep sets. Are we really going to ignore them? I don't know. That doesn't seem smart. Next, heavier weights, heavier loading, sets of 5 to 10, etc., cause more wear and tear on joints and connective tissues chronically. You do hack squats with sets of 5, 6, and 7, your knees may feel a certain way after a few months you're not interested in feeling. You do hack squats or leg presses with sets of 15, 20, 25, your soul's going to hurt, but your knees are probably going to be okay, relatively speaking, because look, over the weeks, months, and years of training, pounding heavy ass weights consistently and never going high rep to let the body have a break, especially, but it's just going to beat your ass much further. I mean, look at the injury rates between powerlifters and bodybuilders. If you look up the stats, and they do exist, bodybuilders are just the most safe of anyone, and it's probably not entirely unrelated to the fact that on average don't go as heavy. When you're a powerlifter, you're doing sets of 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe up to sets of 10, but usually no lighter. You're in that fucking range where shit just beats your ass. And most powerlifters you talk to, like, how are your joints? They're like, what do you mean? Like, compared to what? Scott the Video Guy, did you ever hear that Thomas Sowell economist joke? It's a joke told by economist Thomas Sowell about other economists. Says an economist meets another economist in the street, and they're friends. And one economist goes to the other. He goes, hey, so how's your wife? And the other economist goes, compared to what? Well, economics jokes, everything is a comparison. Pretty good, right? Burn.
It's economist joke.
Right? It's just the funniest kinds of jokes are by technical experts in economics. But powerlifters, you're like, hey, how are your joints? Like, compared to what? Like, well, compared to when you started powerlifting, they're like, oh, I'm an old man. I'm like 78 years old. Like, what about compared to last year when you hurt yourself? You're like, oh, yeah, much better. I'm doing more high reps now. And you're like, yeah, okay. Shit starts to make sense. Another downside of going really heavy is a really long warm-up time. And think about this. If you want a good back workout, you're very big and strong, you might have to do 500 pounds for reps in the deadlift. Like, one does not simply. You do warm up with 135. If you really want a freewheel run and gun, you go to 315 next. But if you're smarter than me, you go to 225, 315, 405, 500 for a warm-up, and then 500 for work sets. Holy fucking shit. I watched Chad Wesley Smith, one of the powerlifting greats of all time, warm up to hit, he was doing 7 plates and change on a side for reps in the squat for powerlifting, high bar squat in a rack just by himself. And you guys, no joke, I was training with him. I was doing my workout while he was doing his, same gym, and we were chatting between sets. And Chad moves. Like, he doesn't just fucking sit around. Like, he's loading plates, he's chilling for a second, he's doing a set, he's chilling a little bit, he's loading plates again. It's not just lollygagging. I swear to God, you guys, it took 30 minutes before Chad did his first work set. I was fucking halfway done with my workout. In powerlifting, weightlifting, strongman, there is no way around that. That's just part of the game. You cannot warm up as much and get fucked up, or you can take a lot of time to warm up and lose a lot of time, but gain a lot of awesome strength. But when you're bodybuilding and someone's like, did you know that if you did higher reps, you would have to do half as much time warming up and still be safe from injury because higher reps aren't that dangerous? You'd be like, no. That's nonsense. I want to spend half of my time in the gym warming up. Starts to be a little weird. On the other hand, higher reps have their distinct disadvantages as well. Remember, the advantages here is that they all grow muscle really well. High reps, it's tougher to gauge failure. When you stopped at rep number 25, Did you stop because you just like smoked the cig, you didn't want the shit anymore? Like it hurts a lot. Maybe you're like, fuck that. Or did you stop because you were really 2 reps in reserve? Hard to tell. 2 reps, 5 reps in reserve, real mystery when you get to really high reps. And for some folks that aren't prone to serious bouts of mental effort, they might not get ideal results from high reps because they kind of mail it in. Next downside is the pain that you experience near failure can increase your total fatigue that you experience from training if you're doing high repetitions. I'll put this another way. Sets of 8 in the leg press, let's say 4 sets of 8. I mean, like, it's uncomfortable, sort of. The last 2 reps might cause a little bit of a burn, sort of. But then afterwards, you can breathe heavy and then you're fine. It fucks you up for sure in its own special way, but there's something different about that experience. And 4 sets of 20 in the leg press. Because every rep from 14 to 20 is just going to be a lot of pain. And it's an exponentially rising amount of pain. You guys ever get off a leg press or a hack squat and your body kind of does this writhing thing? You're just like, oh, get me out. It's just your body's like, bro, what are you doing to me? This hurts. And pain is a net addition to fatigue. I mean, if every one of your workouts just kind of feels heavy and hard and you feel accomplished and kind of the muscles just clicking, it's easy to have low fatigue and keep getting motivated to come back to the gym. If you're doing high reps all the time, for real, you may be experiencing so much pain in the gym that the gym just becomes a symbol of pain for you. And you don't want any more of that shit. And it's pain that goes away acutely right away after, a minute or 2. But it follows you psychologically for the rest of the week, rest of the month, rest of the year, to the point where someone's like, you want to train back? You're like, nope, I quit training years ago. Fuck all that. I'm not trying to get hurt. Now, nobody's going to quit training, but the sustainability of high rep training may be in question because it's so goddamn painful to get the same results that with low rep training. While it's a little more risky, low rep training is just not as hard. It's just not as hard. Lastly, high reps do dump a lot of metabolites into the equation, and thus you can have some metabolic fatigue. And that's a thing really importantly acutely. If you do a lot of high reps, you're kind of done with that workout afterwards because you're just too fatigued to keep going. If you do a lot of low reps, a lot of times you can still do more just by going high rep and doing a few extra sets. The reverse usually isn't true. And there may be an accumulative form of metabolic fatigue, nothing too crazy, but it's another way of saying that high reps are going to fuck you up in their own special way. But low reps also fuck you up in their own special way and can get you much more hurt. So really some trade-offs here, which means you have to choose your approach based on a few different factors. First, for every single exercise that you're using, you as a lifter, a thinking lifter, want to find the rep range that gives you the best stimulus to fatigue ratio, roughly, which means what? You have to find rep ranges for whatever exercise you're using that you can perceive some good tension in the target muscle that give you some combination of that tension and a high degree of burn. So if it's high reps, you get a crazy burn out of it. If it's low reps, you get crazy tension perception. If at high reps or low reps, you're missing the tension and or burn entirely. So for example, if you're doing high rep rows and someone's like, you getting a good burn out of that? You're like, no, I just get tired. You're sure shit not feeling tension. Maybe high reps for rows aren't for you. But if you do low rep rows, you don't feel any burn, but the tension is crazy. It's just tearing your fucking back apart every rep. Hey, that's really good. On the other hand, you can do low reps sometimes and someone's like, do you feel tension on that curl? You're like, I just feel it in my elbows, to be honest. I can't really feel my biceps in it at all. But if you switch that same curl and do higher reps, that's a 20, your biceps burn like crazy in the last 5 reps and you're like trying to fucking wiggle out the lactic acid. You're like, oh my God, bro, this is fucking nuts. Then that's good. Then biceps are probably something you should train in higher rep range in that exercise than lower. So that's how that tension and burn trade-off. There's also the pump, which rep ranges give you the best pump. It's not always the answer, but it's part of the answer. So if you have a rep range that gives you similar pump sets of 5 to 10, then 15 to 20, it doesn't kind of much matter where you do on this metric, but if sets of 5 to 10 give you a way better pump, which for very fast twitch muscles is true, then sets of 15 to 20 for my chest, for example. If I do a straight set of 18 reps for my pecs in a press, in many cases, my chest just gets tired. I'm just like, I don't know what the fuck that was. No pump, no deep fatigue. But if I do a hard set of 8, bro, my shit blows up like crazy. Some people will say pumps are something you can get better for higher reps. And that's not categorically true. Yes, you do get more pumps in sets of, I would say, 10/12 to 30 than you would get normally in 5 to 12 reps. But if you have a great pumps from one, but not great tension, they kind of balance out. So pump is absolutely a factor. And if you just get absolutely psychotic pumps from slightly higher reps and from slightly lower reps, you get not really much of a pump at all, but the tension feel of those low reps isn't also that great, maybe low reps aren't as good of a stimulus for you. Another one is perturbation. If you can do a bunch of low reps and just jump, hop, skip out of the gym, run around, and you're fine, I don't know, man. I don't know if you got all that stimulus that you needed. But if you do low reps and you have trouble like getting up and down the stairs, good things are happening. That means you might be a responder to low rep range in that exercise. The other thing is for high reps. If you do high reps and your muscles are shaky and weird and crampy, hey, awesome. If you do high reps and you're kind of just like, my biceps are just tired. That's all I can say. It's like if you're a pretty decent runner and you run a few miles, people are like, your legs pumped? You're like, no. Do they feel wacky and wobbly? No. What do they feel like? Or they're just tired. Like, well, that's not really growth promoting, is it? No. So if you get really good perturbation, like your muscles get really messed up in a deep way, cramping, trouble with coordination, massive decline in strength, if that happens for low reps, moderate reps, or high reps, whichever reps they happen best at are probably the reps that you should be doing for that exercise. And of course, soreness. If one rep range causes crazy delayed onset muscle soreness and the other rep range just really does not much at all, again, that's not the whole story, but it's part of the story. And if one rep range convincingly fucks you up way more than the other, 65-35, you should probably be doing a little bit more of that rep range. On the other hand, you have to account for fatigue. So that's the stimulus side of the stimulus to fatigue ratio. The fatigue is things like axial fatigue. If you're doing high reps in the squat, then your back's not being crushed. But if you're doing low reps, your back is being crushed, and then your deadlifts and rows are going to get affected to a huge extent. No bueno. Part of the trade-off, but it's a trade-off. Another thing is systemic fatigue. Some people do low reps, and it beats them up so much neurologically that they're just like defeated for days after. I used to train with some powerlifters, and after doing hard sets of 5 to 8 reps, they would just get done. They checked out the rest of the day in a way that when these same folks did higher reps, the higher reps are harder during the workout. But an hour or two later, you're like chipper again. You can study, you can work, you do everything. Low reps take something out of you sometimes that you can't really replace right away. So systemic fatigue can be higher for higher reps or lower reps, but based on the exercise and based on the muscle, you're going to feel that fatigue a little bit less or more in some cases with higher or low reps, and you should be picking the ones at which you feel the fatigue less. And lastly, and this one's really simple, joint and connective tissue fatigue, which means acute, like right at the time, how do your joints feel, and also chronic. After weeks of going heavy, how do your joints feel? Sometimes for some movements, some muscles, people go heavy fucking day in, day out, their joints feel great. Some folks will go heavy and their joints will feel like they're made of paper or sand or something like that. And they're like, okay, this is a bad idea. And if you're one of those folks that which heavy doesn't do great things for the joints, you're going to bias more of your rep ranges on average to the higher rep range and vice versa. So for every single exercise that you use, try to optimize for stimulus to fatigue ratio through rep range, which means you're going to come up with a lot of different answers. Once you come up with, okay, I think for me, for barbell rows, sets of 15 to 20 seem to be like checking most of the boxes for me in the best way and the fewest of the bad boxes. Do most of your work in that range that you figured out for that exercise, for example, but consider a little bit of variation. How should you introduce this variation? At least one set in an exercise or one exercise in a week's worth of training for that muscle group. Work outside of your typical rep range because there is at least one good study and a little bit of compelling physiological rationale to see that rep range diversity, having some low reps and some high reps, may optimize gains. May. This is very tentative, but it might be worth a try. And maybe it boosts overall growth by attacking multiple pathways at once. You're attacking the metabolite and pathway and the pump pathway, but also the tension pathway, maybe higher reps and low reps in combination attack all those better than just by themselves. I wouldn't this isn't something really to invest into for sure. But what I would say is if you find that rows do best for you in sets of, 5 to 10, don't just always ever do horizontal pulling movements 5 to 10. Maybe in the 4 horizontal pulling movements you do all week, spread over 2 or 3 training days, maybe in 3 of them, you go roughly 5 to 10 in the rep range. But in one of them, try 15 to 20 or something like that. You may actually enjoy the results, and just the psychological diversity of that variation can be something that enhances your experience in the gym. Always doing sets of 5 to 10, it can fucking wear on you. But you throw a little 15 to 20 in there, and all of a sudden, it's really kind of cool. Next, as you evolve over time as a lifter, you want to play around with rep ranges in each exercise. Even if you already have a rep range that you think, this is my best, you have to play with it over and over. It's good advice on many grounds. Isn't that right, Scott, the video guy? Mm-hmm. Well, what are we talking about? The RP Hypertrophy app comes with dozens of pre-made programs from 2 days of training per week all the way up to 6 days of training, with specialized programs included for shoulders, arms, chest, back, legs, abs, and glutes, each one with male and female options. You get them all and can use them as often as you like, even building off of them to make your own customized versions for only about $1 a day. Click on the link in the description of this video to get started. So, for example, let's say that the last time you did hack squats, 5 to 10 reps was your jam. But you've done leg presses and split squats since then, and it's actually been months since you tried the hack squat. When you try the hack squat again, is the smart money to go sets of 5 to 10? Yeah, sure. But also, if you're in an off season, maybe not a high pressure training phase where it's not a lot dependent on that, you can explore a little bit. And as an intermediate lifter especially, this is exactly what you should be doing with your time. Try sets of 10 to 15 on the hack squat. And you may find that because you got bigger, because you got stronger, because your technique is better, because your mind-muscle connection is better, and maybe because you're leaner and your cardiovascular fitness is higher, all of a sudden, sets of 10 to 15 are just fucking unreal. Whereas before, when you thought 5 to 10 was your best, it turns out you were just not in good enough cardio shape for cardio not to be a limiting factor in sets of 10 to 15. Things change. Your body changes. Your technique changes. The same rep range isn't always going to be the right answer. On average, it's the better guess. But things change, so try different stuff. If you're feeling another rep range, lean into it. Give it a try for a little while, and then have some diversity. Over the long term, and by that I mean literally the years 3 to 7 of your intermediate lifting career, you're going to have tried so many things that you're going to really start to know what on average good things are for you and on average not so good things are for you. And then you're advanced, and then you can do a much better job of organizing your training. Next consideration is, I would say, really give some thought to going slightly higher rep than normal in the tail ends of fat loss diets, especially bodybuilding contest prep, but really any fat loss diet. When you're in a fatigued state, you are less athletic, you are less free and mobile, and you tend to make more mistakes in gross movement patterns, and thus that jacks up your probability of injury. So if you're training heavy and your coordination kind of sucks compared to usual because you're so goddamn fatigued, it's not a really good outcome for you, maybe potentially. But if you go lighter, you can't really get hurt as much. And so your lower coordination, lower athleticism, and higher proclivity to injury in any one given rep or set, really kind of muted by the fact that you're going lighter. So that might be something to think about. Here's another thing. As you go through a fat loss diet, your intramuscular mTOR pathway, the kind of central pathway that regulates growth, that promotes muscle growth, starts to take a bit of a hit. It's getting a lot of stimuli into it that says, hey, like, we don't have enough food, we're too goddamn tired, stop growing all this muscle, you're going to get us killed. But the AMPK and its related pathways, and this is a pathway that's the central regulator of endurance adaptation inside muscle cells, it really gets a boost. It gets a boost. AMPK gets a boost when you do hypocaloric dieting, which is exactly what a fat loss is. It gets a boost when you do more cardio, and it gets a boost of overall long runs of high training volume. So this AMPK pathway is able, as it upregulates its activity, it makes you a lot better at reps, but it doesn't make you a whole lot better at adding weight to the bar. So when you are in high rep training phase and potentially adding reps every week or two, rather than adding a lot of load, this could fit the mode of you already being so reliant on that AMPK pathway and not being able to rely on the mTOR pathway nearly as much. In other words, yeah, you're still trying to hit that mTOR pathway as much as you can with as much growth as possible. But because AMPK is going to be like in there mucking up the works, you might as well ride the wave and say, okay, AMPK reduces my ability to grow muscle. It adds fatigue. It sucks. But it does let my endurance go up a little bit. So I'm going to use my endurance by leaning into higher reps and be able to hit some PRs versus leaning into lower reps. And then I'm just categorically weaker. And that, at least from a psychological perspective, makes fat loss dieting way more fun when you can lighten up your loads, do some higher reps, and still hit mini PRs all the way into the end of your fat loss phase. Versus if you just keep going heavy, you just get weaker all the time. And it's really kind of fucking disappointing. What about calorie burn? People say, look, when you do higher reps, you burn more calories. That's technically true, but the difference is insanely small. And because you have such huge ability to vary your calories based on just diet, man, you're just never going to notice. It's not going to make a big difference. And here's another thing. We have to know why we're in the gym. Very specific task. We're in the gym lifting weights for hypertrophy training exclusively to grow muscle and prevent muscle loss. Same pathways, really. We are not in there to burn extra calories. Calorie burning is something you adjust with your diet and your level of physical activity, which could be cardio or it could be steps. I wouldn't want to mix the two. So when I'm in the gym, I'm trying to get fucking jacked. And if I have to toast my normal workout just to do higher reps, just to burn 27 more calories that workout, that's not going to work. So I would say stick to just muscle growth training, whatever that is, high reps, low reps, whatever, at the tail end of a fat loss phase, and let the diet and the activity take care of the magnitude of calorie deficit, which is what gets you lean in the end. And lastly, if for you tons of rep ranges work well, that's a good thing. Because some people say, look, trying to find out what rep range works well for my body, works best. Okay. But they all just seem to work about the same, and people feel like they're missing something. But this is the ultimate example of feeling like you're missing something, but in fact, everyone else is missing something. Which is to say, if tons of rep ranges work super well for you, then you can just vary them every few mesos just for some cool psychological variation and have amazing long-term results. People are like, hey man, hack squats, what do you do for hack squats? Rep set wise, you're like 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 20, and then I'll just mile around my way up to 30 every now and again. And they're like, okay, wow, no wrong answers. Like, yeah, I would love for every machine and every muscle group to have a broad spectrum of ranges at which it grows roughly the best, because then I can at least have a lot of fun and do a lot of variety and training. And look, if I like my tricep feels kind of weird, kind of injury prone, then I can do pull downs for high reps instead of pull ups for low reps and mitigate the risk of pulling my tricep, but also still get great gains. Whereas if you're one of these people that, their lats only grow from low reps or grow mostly from low reps more than they would for high reps, you kind of like have to take one to the dick on that one. You're like, okay, hurt my tricep a little bit. Can't do heavy pulling. I guess I'll just have to do high reps, but they kind of suck for me. So when folks get into this high rep versus low rep debate and they're like, well, I think for me, I can't really tell the difference. Amazing. You won the trump card. Just vary that situation over time. Do some high reps here, some low reps here, different muscle groups, different exercises. No wrong answers. Unbelievable. All right. Let's wrap this whole thing up chatting about what beginners, intermediates, and advanced folks can take away from this. Beginners first. As a beginner, you want to train with mostly sets of 5 to 10 reps to master your technique. Sets of fewer than 5 reps are too heavy to train technique well, and they don't give you enough practice doing the actual technique because every rep is practice and your nervous system is learning a lot. If you're doing much more than sets of 10, the fatigue towards the end of those sets is so deleterious to your technique. Like beginners, when they start getting hurt in the squat, not injury hurt, just like quads and lungs, they start doing all kinds of weird shit that doesn't look like a squat anymore, just kind of surviving, grinding out reps. And you don't want to train beginners with shit technique because they learn shit technique and they have to unlearn it later. Unlearning technique is really, really difficult, even if it's bad technique. So sets of 5 to 10, usually in the compound heavy basics, are really ideal for beginners. So none of this rep range shit even applies to you guys. Amazing. For intermediates, I encourage you to use a wide variety of rep ranges on all muscles and movements, staying between 5 and 30 reps on average, though you can get away from that a little bit on the margins. Explore away and note to yourself, either in a logbook or RP hypertrophy app, or just, intuitively, what best responses from stimulus to fatigue ratio seem to occur at what rep ranges for what muscles and what movements. You might have 2 back machines at your gym. One of them you love for heavy, and the other one kind of sucks for heavy, but for high reps it's great, and vice versa. So it's something to note. So when you program this machine, you're going to be like, ooh, oh yeah, this is the heavy one. I'll go heavy. Great. I'll put it early in my workout so I have tons of energy. Whereas the machine that only really works well for high reps, only feels good for high reps, you go, ooh, I got that machine. Better put it at the end of my workout because high reps after that I'm not going to do anything. And if I did high reps earlier, it would just tire me out for the rest of my workout. So definitely a lot of logic you can use there. As an intermediate, you learn a ton about the relationship between your body and the gym. And you get all these inroads and all these go this way versus that way, kind of like a probability map. And that's you learning the craft, which is a big deal. When you become advanced, you should center your rep ranges around the best SFRs because you're less in an exploratory phase and more of a, I have to milk the last of my gains kind of phase. And then you just don't bet against high stimulus to fatigue ratio exercises. They're objectively the ones you should be doing the most. And you've already explored a bunch. So now okay, this is really my core of the shit that works. Hey, dope. Fucking awesome. And you want to include some variation in there, especially when the SFR is still high. So for example, if ideally you do curls for sets of 15, but sets of 12 is still pretty fucking good, and sets of 18 are still pretty fucking good. You know, do some sets of 12 earlier in the week, sets of 18 later in the week for a few months. That's awesome versus just going to 15, which is your best SFR. So if the SFR is still very good, competitive, variation can overcome some of that disadvantage, and all of a sudden, yeah, you're sticking mostly to the rep ranges that you like, but you're varying a little bit as long as the variance isn't just like someone comes up to you and like, sets of 8 today on leg press, and you're like, how's it feel? Like shit, I fucking hate it. Like, why are you doing it? Variation. Like, what does this variation have like a limit? You know, to make an awful, terrible analogy is, I guess, my gift from God is, you know, like what kind of stuff is fun to do with consenting adults in the bedroom? And the answer is the kind of stuff that everyone likes. And if you're doing stuff that you're not into at all, you really just hate it, you wish you weren't there, it's time to say something, you know? So Scott the Video Guy, you can tell your Monday orgy group, listen, I don't like it when you guys bring the toaster into bed. I don't understand it, though the electricity scares me and thus turns me on. Last time I put my hand in the hot area, it just didn't go well for me.
Oh, you put your hand in it.
That's what you're supposed to do.
Oh.
You've been missing the whole orgy concept, haven't you? We'll talk after this. In any case, it's one of those things where variation is great as long as you like everything. Think of another less insane analogy. You go to a restaurant. People are like, what food do you order here? You're going to tell them I order this, I order that, I order this and that. They're like, why don't you order this other thing? Because I don't like it. Like, yeah, but it's variation. Like, I know, but I don't like it. So it's great to do variation as an advanced person if the variation still checks the major boxes. But as an intermediate, you should be trying everything. So someone could be like, why are you doing sets of 8 on leg press? Do you love it? As an intermediate, you're like, no, I don't really like that much. And I'm like, okay, why are you doing it? You're like, well, maybe I'll like it in a few weeks or months, because you can change your technique, you can change your cadence, you can just grow into liking the movement. That shit happens. But after fucking 5 years of your intermediate career and trying different stuff, as an advanced person, you're not going to want to sway really far off the map of shit you definitely like. And as an advanced person, you should also consider focusing on higher repetitions with less weight towards the end of a fat loss diet, just to reduce your chance of injury and keep the good high performance coming along. In any case, yeah, is it true that low reps are better than high reps for muscle gain? We have no reason to believe that's the case. We have multiple reasons to believe that they're roughly equally effective, but on different scenarios and different margins, different trade-offs for different people at different times, one or the other, higher reps or low reps, could be the better answer. In any case, I hope you guys learned stuff. If you learned a lot, please send this video to other people so that we can become more popular on the internet, because that will make us happy, Scott the Video Guy? I don't know about happy. But anyway, send people the video anyway. Maybe it'll make them sad. Isn't that nice? Huh? What? See you guys next time.